Let's talk about the Peridot issue 1 by Noisms. This was a one and done zine from 2016. All the material in it is by Noisms, also author of Yun Suin, most notably, and editor and author within the Hall of the Third Blue Wizard. This basically, it's a lovely cover, isn't it? Panchume and her Wraith Ravens. This consists of three things. It consists of a hexcrawl called Eshnunna, miscellany, which is NPCs, magic items, and a couple of micro adventures or encounters, and a short story at the end, the Sillarashvo saga. I'll say I enjoyed that. I think it reached for style, it didn't quite accomplish, but it has this fun kind of like there's these three adventurers, including a slugman magic user, and they're off looking to find a mysterious figure in the wilderness to bring back to a paying customer, but then they also hear about treasure, and it has that vibe of a bit like it's where D&D draws on things like Fafnir and the Grey Mouser. This is a post facto kind of example, but it feels like that picaresque, adventurous, risk-taking D&D where they're trying to deal with different monsters with different advantages and disadvantages. They're dealing with locals in particular ways. They've got particular abilities. No, great fun, within reason. What we'll do is we'll look at a few bits with Eshnunna, some monsters, some encounter tables, and some hexes, and then we'll look at a couple of the miscellanies. The art includes art by many people, including Stefan Poig, so yeah, that's good, isn't it? Eshnunna is Mesopotamia. In the ancient past, when the sun was brighter, plants were greener, and gods walked amongst men. It's supernatural Mesopotamia, of Age of Empires 1 vintage, and it is fairly bare bones. So you get told very early on when it says how to run games, really it doesn't give you very much advice. It just says there are 3 dungeons, but you have to write the dungeons, plus there are random encounter tables and monsters and rumours. Here's a couple of good monsters to look at, and then I think there's one other I want to show you. The skin of Ilyanka. Oh, it's fragments of skin shed by a god servant, and they are unpleasant and they lie to you, and they're not actually very strong, though 2 times D2 is always an irritating kind of attack pattern because you're getting so much ping damage. There's no number appearing in the bestiary. This is a partial bestiary. The encounter tables have a number appearing if you have an encounter with them. The Kogara is the dirt from under Enki's finger and toenails, and they just want to drag people back to Apsu, or their life force back to Apsu, to be used in Enki's attempts to revive the dead goddess Inanna. And they've got an ability to pull out the soul. They can transform into a giant fly. They never surprise opponents due to stench. They are sick. They're 1 HD, 6 AC, and 2 times D3 damage. Not super powerful, but definitely much more of a challenge than the skin of Ilyanka. And look, it is a bull centaur. The Kusariku. The bovine, stinking, sweaty hindcourse of a bull, rippled trunk-like torso of a powerful, oversized man emerging where the neck should be. So I don't know if this is more inspired by Legend or by Warhammer Fantasy, but isn't that fun? Good picture. I think that's Stefan Poag. They are obviously much more powerful. 5 plus 1 HD, 5 AC. They can charge. They've got trample. So you've got a scale of the kind of monsters you're going to have to deal with or fight. Sample. Here's a sample encounter table. Forested Hills. On the 2, you get a hermit. On the 12, you get a mighty Malulu, a man-lion lord on a quest for the gods. You can also get giant scorpions, or the scorpion and the Gertablili. In the middle, this, to be fair, not all of them are as dangerous as this. 6, so the joint most common result is a giant spider. Or they can be baboons. They're fierce and testosterone-fueled. 1 and 3 of them at least are. I like, you've got bandits who might have jackals with them. Obviously, there's not always, you've got a chance of in-layer and stuff. You don't necessarily know what the layer chance is. It does have a treasure type, which is helpful, but this points you towards Labyrinth Lord, which is what this is, statted for. So in that sense, part of the bare bonesness is the assumption that you are looking at the rules as well, which is fair. But it's still there's a few things I think we see from this already, by the way. Oh, by the way, you got to write your own dungeons. Oh, here's a few weird, kooky monsters, and here's some perfectly functional, but not super detailed encounter tables. I like the encounter tables for what it's worth. You can already see. I think there's a way in which it's an artifact of its time, but we'll get to that. Actually, I'll come back to that. We'll be looking at this. So let's scan back. Here is the hex map, no scale. I have looked a couple of times, and I think I found the scale once, but maybe it simply came to me in a dream. It is numbered on a spiral. This is to avoid hex coordinates. I prefer hex coordinates. But yeah, there are 31 locations, some of which are more like, oh, here's a couple of things to do. Some of which are, here is a pseudo encounter or something to look at. Eshnunna itself is the major settlement, and it has a temple with the highest level NPC, I think, is Kiri, the cleric at the temple, who has a magical mace, I think it is, sacred mace, and they cater to the needs of Tishpak's sacred bulls, who trample criminals or adulterers to death in the spring and autumnal equinox festivals, which sounds like a lovely day out. I would say, and this is the same with several other things, the way in which this side of the potential adventure is shown is that you can see, not just, you might be interested in going and getting services from a 6th level cleric, but also, look at this super valuable statue. Loads of treasure. Then there's the mayor, the lord, the king, who has a 5th level magic user accompanying him, and 5th level fighters. He's actually lower level than his escort, which is fine, doesn't not make sense. And his treasure is in the basement of his fort, the only stone building in the town except for the temple. And this is, pretty clearly silver standard, but for what it's worth. So 1,000 SP equals 1,000 XP in treasure. There's no treasure value for magic items because we're in Labyrinth Lord, so it's a basic derived game where magic items don't give you XP. Yeah, you can see there's an implied adventure here. You could go and rob him. It's not something strongly foregrounded or anything. Joshua the thief, well, again, he's in a rumour which is relevant, like as a potential employer. But there's not loads of details here about either Joshua or his wife Ninshuel. You hear that he's friends with some robbers possibly, and he is served by beggars, and he wants to take over the city. And Ashmay the witch, who takes unusual payments to give you scrying, basically, and who has goat man husbands. Here we go, her goat man husbands. So, and Amarazan the trader, who she has guarded her brothers. There's a white, black, and a blue brother, and they can swap their head, torso, arms, and legs for different powers. So this is all super characterful. Like the major NPCs at the centre of this campaign world are super characterful. They all have stuff you can do. They all have potential items they might buy or sell, or services they might offer, and there's stuff you can rob off them. Eshnunna, the city, also has rumours, a D12 rumour table. Joshua wants magic items from the lost city of Jemdet Nasir. One of Ergadina's favourite concubines has fled and he wants returned. So this is just pointing you out to the hexes mostly. A hex goes to the underworld of Apsi, where Enki resides. That is, again, all pretty functional. This is all very much on the basis of this is true, these are true. They're not all completely true, they don't all always give the most vital information, but they are all true, and so you need to, that is not a bad way for a rumour table to be. We'll look at a couple of hexes. I was about to give, expand my thought from earlier, but we'll look at a couple of extra hexes. That was my thought. The Gypsum Quarry. Ergadina's brother is there. There's slaves there. There's a bit of treasure described, not loads. 1,300 XP worth of it, plus combat XP. But probably the main thing here is, you think the obvious thing here is you could get a slave rebellion going, maybe to cover you nicking the stuff. It's not otherwise an insanely interactive hex, even though it's quite functional. Like there's a thing there, there's treasure there. There's some slaves, and you could get rewarded potentially for bringing them back. There's a battlefield which is basically empty, though you might occasionally meet the albino buffalo from 12. There's mute woodcutters, and these guys might be cannibals, or they might not be, but no information is given. That's kind of up to you to fill out. Remember, it is described as what does it say? How is it described at the start? It is, I can't find the exact quote. Basically, to the effect of the players and the DM are going to have to create this together, and of course, really, that means the DM. Enlil's Tower is a rival temple with the limestone shading. No alignment given, so they might, and they do take sacrifices. There's a way in which this is one, again fits into a certain era, I suppose. And then you have there's a big hyena pack, and the Spring from Apsu, which is a potential dungeon going underground. Awesome sounding dungeon, watery, damp tunnels and caves and caverns, inhabited by the creatures of Enki and of the underworld, and maybe you've got Enki himself at the bottom waiting next to the corpse of Inanna. This is cool, but of course I would love, basically I immediately think I just want this product, Eshnunna, to be 3 times the size, not 30 pages or whatever, but 90, 96. And I want it to have these dungeons in it rather than, oh, here's an idea for a dungeon. There's there's some comps. So, you look at Dolmenwood, which has this enormous, expansive, detailed hexcrawl, and of course the major dungeons aren't detailed in that, but several dungeons of both major and minor form have come up in adventures, so you don't want to complain too much about it, but it's something where it immediately puts you as the DM on notice, and it's very honest about it that you're just going to have to write a bunch of stuff. I like writing adventures, but I also like just being able to run stuff, and that is a downside here. There's like weird eldritch eels there as well. I think there are things that show it's 2016, 9 years ago, a lifetime ago in old school Renaissance terms. I think you can see that it has a few kind of influences and things going on. It's in this period where creating toolboxes for the DM is almost inherently cool, because it's hard to make a whole product, especially on the kind of small margins with the limited time we amateurs have. So give a DM some tools, and that's fair enough, but I think it's something which I wonder whether or not that has, in the bifurcation and splitting of the old school movement, become less popular or useful in some segments. Some of us would rather say, I just want a product I can run, and I'll happily add stuff onto it, but I want a product I can run. There is things like, it's gone for that very strong aesthetic. It's not like Tekkamel, there's less Nazism, but it's got a bit of that Tekkamel vibe of like, here is this, very much influenced by a different world. A problem with that can be players inherently know stuff about Western mythology, if they are Westerners, if they're in Britain or America or whatever. They know about Western mythology in a way that gives them more clues than they realise, and being in a different mythology, different world that doesn't have those presumptions can be difficult. I've told the story actually before of in Dark Sun, one of the players in the streamed Dark Sun game saying, I just realised that metal's valuable. I was baffled. I was baffled for 2 sessions why we wanted this big bit of rusted chain. And it was a thing where, even though he'd read the stuff, it hadn't internalized enough. And I think there's something, that can happen like that here. You don't know the Mesopotamian myths, but that's also where it's fun and cool, and it shows D&D. When I read this, and it's a bit like Prince and I recently spoke about Slumbering Ursine Dunes. It's a bit like that you're like, look, actually you can just run D&D based on other mythoi and other worlds, as long as there is this kind of dynamic exploratory element, and combat can be a useful part of it. I think the actual hexes we've looked at, as the 31 we've looked at 6.5, they are really good within the limits of what they're saying. And as I say, in some cases they're really good as a kind of, this works, but it'd be exaggeration to say they're really good on their own. They're not an adventure on their own. Eshnunna is. Enlil's Tower could be, and you can get stuff, you can get their magical metal mattocks. The Hyena Pack certainly is, and the Spring from Apsu is, but you've got to write it yourself. The other couple, either Battlefield, the Mute Woodcutters, and the gypsum quarry are less so, though maybe you can make something out of them. Let's skip forward now and we'll look at some miscellany. Well, actually, we'll look at the old comments. By the way, this is the map of Gemdet Nasir, above ground, not below ground, and that's fun. You know, you're going to have to put the work in even to detail this, but it's nice to have the resource for that one lost city, ruined city. The old comrades are a high-level rival adventuring party or hired adventuring party. I quite like it's Picozzi is the leader, but for the others, I quite liked, given there is sometimes too much white space, the best use of white space and high white space margins is the fact these are facing. This is left-hand side, this is right-hand side. That's nice to be able to kind of look at all the stats on one side and look at all the character summaries on another side. I like that. It's distinctive and weird and circus-like. You know, there's dwarves who have managed to, they via stealing creative essence, they gain magic user powers. You think, well, that's cheating, isn't it? But that's fun. That's legitimate. Cheating is fine if you're the DM. But yes, if in terms of creating a bit of spice in the world, you got the ringed toes on the pickled foot, which have these 5 magic items, and they each do a different thing, and they're each one use, and they each are quite powerful. One of them is a Vorpal disc. One of them is just traps them, and it's unbreakable and lasts until removed. Yeah, there's obviously no treasure values or anything because we're talking about Lab Lord. As a mid-ish level, low to mid-level even, frankly, magic item, which is, 5 charges, different spells each is a way to think about it. You find this weird foot with these rings on it. It's pretty fun. And you could drop this in. I think this is easier than what are these guys even called again? The Old Comrades. The Old Comrades, it's a freak show that you can have as a high level. The rival party at mid to high level is the thing which is most likely to press the game into feeling more like a war game, being more complicated, sometimes being longer if you're fighting them. But then maybe you're both just rival groups but in a high level dungeon and you don't need to fight. Maybe there is some reason to ally with them. That is just as plausible a use of them, I think. And then, we want to look at Panchin May and her Wraith Ravens. This is one of a couple of micro adventures. And this is Yunsuin coded, obviously. There is a ruined village, and there's a sorceress madame who ran the finest and most well-known whorehouse, but she's become a lich. She's got phylactery. And her phylactery and the amazingly valuable statue on top of it are guarded by crawling claws. She has... you can either kill her or the phylactery itself, which is the large jade statue of a monkey beside a tortoise, is very valuable. The weight of 3 men she'll pursue it. She has raven wraiths. They see everything in Lanling. There is a little representative map of the ruins. There's Panchin May. And her treasure, which is in her own house, not under the separate trapdoor of the phylactery. She's got a library. She's got a chest with coins, each of which is worth 30 XP. And next to them is a lewd statue and some lewd items. There's a couple of these things. I think it's in Eshnunna. There is some kind of weird exotic pornography as well. I don't know if this was a phase for Noisms or not, but yeah, it has a custom spellbook that is very 2016 OSR. Large Horn of a Rhinoceros. She's pretty powerful, but I think in terms of the natural end game of the higher to highest functional basic parties, going up to about 10th level perhaps, as a thing you can go and do where you're like, oh, you've got to seek her out. She's got these ethereal ravens who can blind you, so can the crawling claws. They can grab you and either blind you or choke you. The Wraith Ravens can cause you to lose experience because they're like Wraiths. They can only be harmed by magic or silver. Like, this is tough, and she is dangerous on her own. As long as you don't surprise her, it will be hard because she has 9 HD, and that's just 98. There's no kind of special magic user negative discount. You know you're not going to kill her quickly if you do not surprise her, and she has the ravens who can see you. So you've got to work, and of course that gives you multiple options in terms of using her as a DM. Is you can start with her as a dangerous source of information, but then of course the players may think we could just kill her and take all her stuff. Monsters are fun. Having a new monster, the Wraith Raven, is fun. The Crawling Claws, I don't know that that's a Lab Lord creature, and it's not got the same function exactly as an AD&D Crawling Claw, so I think it may be a custom version. But yeah, it's good. In summary, I've talked about the story already. Peridot is quite fun. Nothing is as standalone as the best stuff in Yuan Suin Second Edition, because Yuan Suin and Yuan Suin Second Edition are still both toolboxes, but the Second Edition has even more stuff that you can just like, let's drop this in today. It's certainly, when you think about Eshnunna, the unfair comparison, and it is actually unfair, but to say, oh, is it like Dolmenwood, which is also a hexcrawl? Well, no, Dolmenwood is much more detailed, with many more functional elements. But Eshnunna, as a simple, quickly sketched 30-page, A6-page, A5-page, sorry, kind of sheets of simple but colourful hexes, is an amazing start. I would buy a more complex, more complete supplement based on it. And I think you can see with the miscellany, you've got a good variety of stuff, some of which is maybe, as with a couple of the hexes, you'd say you look at the those weird NPCs and you think, yeah, the old comrades, they're going to be harder to use, but it's a cool idea. It's nice to get ideas from them. The idea of, oh, well, the dwarves steal creative essence is both kind of ridiculous, and you could theoretically think of it as world-breaking, but is also kind of cool. The ring toes on the pickled foot, pretty easy, simple to use, magic item, simple to give out. I like it, and I probably will use it. And then the adventures, we've looked at one of them. The Ichthyosaur's Pool, I think, is the other micro-adventure. I think Panchen May is really colourful, really flavourful, and I would say there's stuff like her phylactery itself is definitely worth cashing in if you can get it, and then abandon it and let other people die so she gets it back. The actual treasure is maybe more dubious in terms. I mean, then it's not worth nothing. I assume, by the way, that is 1d100 in terms of the books. But yeah, you do a few thousand, obviously several thousand gold or XP, I should say. But for killing a bunch of Wraith Ravens and a Lich, it's debatable. But it is, I mean, her spell book is good. But it is a cool thing to have in the world that could be first useful and then potentially a target or objective. So yeah, I think you're going to get lots of useful stuff out of this if you're willing to adapt, or you're running, or you're putting stuff into a world with a slightly funky vibe, or if you're willing to put the work into Eshnunna. If you have read or run anything from Peridot, please do tell me what you thought in the comments, and I'll see you next time.